Hello and welcome to another edition of Exclusive Interview, coming to you from the studios of 84 TV Radio, Abuja, Nigeria. My name is Stanley Bentu. Now I have two words for you today. The first, impossible, and its milder version, highly improbable. Those are two words that describe any kind of longevity in Nigerian democracy. It may be hard for millions of young Nigerians born around or after 1999, but before that year, the longest spell that Nigeria had with democratic governance was 6 years, starting from 1960 to 1966. The interruption of it ultimately led to a devastating civil war that lasted 3 years and left well over 1 million people dead. But right now, a new generation lives, and it lives a different reality. Military governments are the stuff of myth and legends to those who are young. But for all of the excitement and the hopes and aspirations that we shared way back in 1999, have the election processes in Nigeria delivered anything more than longevity? Let's take a look at this.
May 29, 1999, a solemn but hopeful day at the Eagle Square in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The last military administration in Nigeria, led by General Abdulsalam Abubakar, made good its promise to hand over power to a democratically elected government. Young Nigerians dared to have visions while the old folks dreamed dreams of a peaceful and prosperous future. It was a very colorful event where Olusegun Obasanjo, a former military leader himself, took over the reins of power from the military, promising to end all forms of executive arrogance and impunity that defined the old order. For a country endowed generously with both human and material resources, expectations were high that an El Dorado was on the way to be nurtured and sustained by petrodollar that was flowing like a stream into the national coffers. But all that did not happen. Democracy has been a bag of blessings and misfortune for this developing country, prompting many political analysts to question if the journey was worth it. The jury is still out on whether or not Nigeria's experiment with democracy will pay the ultimate dividend. On today's edition of Exclusive Interview, we'll take a look at democracy in Nigeria with a focus on how we fared in 21 years. What lessons have we learned? Have we moved forward, backward, or both at the same time? Our guest on today's edition of the program is political analyst JIDE, who's been a foremost observer of every election in Nigeria since 1999.
Joining me to talk about 21 years of democracy in Nigeria, I have a political analyst who has been an official elections observer since 1999. He's observed over 6 elections in the course of this country. His name is JIDE Ojo. JIDE, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be here too.
Well, talking about democracy in Nigeria, 21 years of it, I want to start with the most obvious, or, well, the part that was often referred to as the dividends of democracy, the economy. It's very interesting for me that in 1999, the Nigerian economy, the GDP was about $59 billion. By 2017, it has skyrocketed to $375 billion. Now, there's been this saying that the worst democratic government is better than the best military government. Do you believe that, especially as it connects to the economy, or are there other factors that made this possible?
Well, in political science, we talk about substructure and superstructure. The politics builds the economy because economy thrives on political decisions. The decision to borrow is a political decision. The decision to embark on certain infrastructural development is a political decision. The decision to diversify into a particular area of the economy is a political decision. So politicians gather to decide what is of priority to the society. And so you cannot based the well-being or otherwise of the economy on politics.
But we had I think going back to the time of General Abdul Salam Abubakar when he handed over back in 1999, we had roughly about $3 billion in our reserve and a debt of close to $30 billion. After the Obasanjo administration, we had in $40 billion in our foreign reserves. And pretty much we had debt forgiveness, and whatever was left, we were able to pay it off. Granted, since then, we have accumulated a huge debt burden after that. But how would you assess 21 years of economic management in Nigeria?
It's a potpourri of issues. I would say it's been a checkered history of boom and bust. You talk about oil booms. The era in the 60s, but when you narrow it to 21 years, which means you are looking at Fourth Republic. In the Fourth Republic, there was a time that oil was selling for above $100 per barrel. And what did we do with the money? We mismanaged. You were talking about the era of debt forgiveness. We shouldn't even be incurring those debts in the first place. But for corruption that crept into our economy. I mean, let me take one very fatal area of corruption. First subsidy. Successive administration have pledged, we are going to end this scam. It's a scam. We are going to put an end to it. We're going to make the refineries work. We are going to do X, Y, Z. But what did we see? We keep paying first subsidy that was started in 1993 and now inherited by the civilian administration of Obasanjo. From then till now, 21 years after, we are not yet out of first subsidy. Then you ask, what is the rocket science that has made our oil refineries not to work at optimal level? Why are we still dependent on importation of fuel? I had the privilege of speaking on a media interview just a couple of days back, and we are looking at the issues around the oil price fluctuation, domestic oil price fluctuation. 2 weeks ago, we had to buy fuel for 125 naira. Then another week after, it's 123. Then before you say Jack Robinson, before people even get to feel the impact of that lowering of the price of refined petroleum product, you've increased it to 143. And you ask yourself, why can't there be price stability? There can't be price stability because you allow international, you do not control your domestic refining. So you export crude and then import it, and you are charged according to the international oil price. So by and large, that's just singling out one area of the economy.
It's a very key area because exporting petrol or petroleum products, oil, this is where we get most of
exactly. That's where our major income, national income comes.
Which means democracy has not been able to fundamentally change the nature of our economy. We've heard about diversification from Obasanjo, Yar'Adua, Jonathan, and now Muhammadu Buhari. I mean, granted, there's been some steps in agriculture, but still a drop in the ocean.
A very much drop in the ocean. And like I said, you can't talk economy without corruption, because successive administration have had to do with bringing different economic policies. You talk about needs under Obasanjo, needs, lease, and seeds. Then that was discarded after 2007. And Yar'Adua came in and came with a 7-point agenda or something of that nature. And then you see discontinuation from, so we see a lot of policy somersault. We say today this administration is banning importation of rice. The next one is saying let's allow some measure of importation, and that policy somersault, inconsistency in policy, and also mismanagement of the economy, basically.
We saw that in the oil industry.
Exactly.
That highlight of the Obasanjo administration, our refineries were sold to a consortium led by the Dangote Group.
Yeah.
And then Yar'Adua reversed it as one of his first acts as the presidency, and we've been going back and forth ever since then. And still, we haven't found an answer as to whether it would be better off to sell those refineries or get them fixed, in spite of the fact that we've spent billions and billions of dollars. And recently, I mean, we got the report after the NNPC auditing that the Kaduna refinery has made nothing and yet has managed to lose $62 billion.
That's
62 billion now.
Look at the turnaround maintenance that they claim they are doing on those refineries. Why is it that in spite of all of those millions of dollars spent on turnaround maintenance of the refineries, they are still less than 20% in stock capacity, working at less than 20% in stock capacity? But let's not even be fixated on the oil sector. Much as there is a lot of opacity in that sector, a lot of revenue losses, vandalism has also not helped matters. Revenue leakages here and there. You know, today we are still trucking crude and refined petroleum products from Apapa, Tikan Island in Lagos to the farthest part of this country. When ordinarily these are things that should be channeled. This is a product that should be channeled through the pipelines. But the pipelines were vandalized, they never get repaired, and then some people who are into oil business are making a kill, collecting, huge revenue from different players, and putting all of that on the consumers. Mm-hmm. Now, let's look at non-oil sector. Look at the revenue leakages in several others. People don't pay tax. So there is a lot of revenue. I mean, our tax to GDP is one of the lowest in the world. And when you say people don't pay tax, it has a reason. People did not see the application of resources made from the oil sector in the development of their society. Not even Niger Delta, whose governors are collecting 13%. They have Niger Delta Ministry. They have NDDC in Niger Delta Development Commission. They even have an amnesty program to calm the restive nerves in the Niger Delta region. Yet, we have seen the huge corruption taking place in that region, including the NDDC. So, it's one is corruption. There is policies of assault I've talked about. Inconsistency, discontinuation from one administration to another, even when they are members of the same party. You saw they are trying to undo what Obasanjo did for political expediency to gain legitimacy or acceptance from a part of the country. Now look at the effort to diversify the economy. You say you want to improve non-oil sector. Then you talked about investment in agriculture. But another thing that has affected our agri is insecurity. Do not forget that very recently, in fact, it's about, we have had more peace in 2020 than we had between 2017 and 2019 in terms of elders-farmers clashes. Mm-hmm.
And this is part of a recurring problem with democracy over the last 20 years that I remember during the military administrations. Maybe a lot of people were not happy, but at least they could go to bed with their eyes closed. And we did have, no doubt, violence has always been a part of Nigerian history, but it wasn't a daily occurrence. And what we're seeing now, you have the bandits, you have cattle rustlers, we have the insurgents in the northeast, you have all kinds of kidnapping. So all of these things have festered over the course of the last 21 years. What have the democratic government gotten wrong?
A lot.
It seems as if the entire security architecture has basically been compromised.
Again, you need to look at a number of 21 years. We are worse off in terms of security than we were 21 years ago. And no thanks to corruption. Because we can still link it back. Look at 2.1 billion Dasuki Gate. National Security Advisor got 2.1 billion to procure arms and ammunition to fight insurgency. And what did they do? They divert part of it to funding the election of the president. the much of that resources was also used to procure fake and inefficient hardware, military hardware. That's why Alex Bade, the former chief of defense staff, was answering corruption charges until he was assassinated or murdered, as it were.
We have to take a break shortly, but I just want to get your comments very quickly on this. I think COVID-19 has exposed the big gash that we have in our security system when the federal government is not even able to enforce a simple thing as interstate travel. And we've seen how that has been converted into a business for our police and armed forces, where people are able to pay their way and travel, and travels were going on almost every day. Even when they talked about the lockdown, keeping people at home, it was a very simple thing. And as a media person, as a journalist, I tested this out. I went out and I was stopped at a point, and I discovered this racket. They would stop you at a point, then the policeman would enter your car, get into your car, ask for your driver's license, hold on to it, and say, okay, let's go to the station. And if you say no, he will now ask you, okay, what do you want to do?
It's a huge racket.
He's asking actually for you to make
an offer.
And if you make that offer, your license gets returned to you, and you're waved by to go wherever you want. Doesn't this snowball into the bigger question? If this is what you can do in an atmosphere of lockdown control, you have to imagine what could be happening with the bigger criminals who are making millions and millions. Are they actually paying some corrupt elements in our security forces? Is this why we can't end Boko Haram and we can't end kidnapping and a lot of these other things? You think?
Stanley, for me, it's a hydra-headed challenge. And when you said 21 years of democracy, the COVID-19 has exposed our security labs, I think that's even minuscule compared to the very deteriorating, dilapidating, deplorable state of our health facilities in 21 years. And that's more worrisome for me. The issue of non-enforcement of lockdown, interstate travel and all of that, we know that was going to happen. You can't press people down unless the moment you remove your hand, they will bounce back. You see, that was why the president, after 5 weeks of lockdown in Abuja, Lagos, and Ogun State, have to lift, kind of faced removal or lifting of that lockdown, because you can't keep people perpetually down for a virus that you don't know when there will be a vaccine to deal with it, or whether there will be a cure for it very soon. I still very much believe that we will overcome COVID-19 challenge. Thank God the fatality is not very high, even though infection rate is widespread. And the exposure is that we now have practically primary healthcare system have collapsed, so it's virtually non-existent. Secondary is just tertiary, as tertiary is still one leg up and one leg down. The bottom line is that what is our investment in our health sector? Health is wealth. A wealthy nation is an healthy nation is a wealthy nation. There are countries that have not even shut down their economy as Nigeria has tried to shut down over COVID-19, because they have facilities to deal with the issue. Unfortunately, in our own case, we have a scenario where people are at the mercy of the elements.
We basically have not lived up to any of our promises,
exactly,
including the 10% that is supposed to go to our healthcare. Well, we have to take a break now, which we will do. But when we come back, we'll be talking about some of the recommendations made by the European Union in order to improve our electoral processes. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
As the world faces the challenge of the coronavirus pandemic and governments around the world are racing against time, AD4 TV Radio thanks you all for doing your part to stop the spread of the disease. Be safe at home and practice hygiene. Protect yourself and others. Do not panic. Do not self-medicate. Listen to all preventive advice and stay at home, as well as maintain social distancing.
Say no to fake news. Get authentic updates from the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. the Federal Ministry of Health, the NCDC, and of course, 84 TV Radio, your reliable and credible channel. Please stay safe to save others.
Welcome back to Exclusive Interview, and I've been having an interesting chat with JIDE Ojo, who's a political analyst. He's watched Nigeria over the past 21 years of democracy. Well, we've been talking about how we have fared so far, and one of the major bones of contention, our electoral processes. And JIDE, I would like us to go through some of the recommendations that have been made over the years, especially from the European Union, as to how we can strengthen these processes. And I just want to touch on some of them. For instance, organization and operational capacity within INEC. It should be considerably strengthened, improve planning, tracking, and the required human and material resources needed for timely and accountable operations. In addition, improve internal communications within INEC. Have we done that?
No. And it may be long in coming. You see, the challenge we have, and it's quite disheartening. We are having a recurring challenge. Over the last 6 electoral cycles, and I've been privileged to observe them all, including some state elections, we keep making the same mistakes all over. I mean, I never thought in my wildest imagination, I was rest assured that we were not going to postpone 2019 elections. But it did happen. Why? Logistic challenge. We couldn't even move facilities. We couldn't move election materials from point A to point B. They got to the airport, there was no forklift that could lift the cartons of election materials because they were too heavy, and there is no provision for forklift that could move that huge volume. And things like that ordinarily should be a routine. How could you say, yes, I know FAM is not under the jurisdiction of INEC, but how could you explain that you have a department that deals with operations and they didn't check with the airports to audit the facilities they have there as to be able to help them with election logistics? Yet we have Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. What were they doing? Then you have issue of late release of fund. So the last general election, you pledged 242 billion, but that 242 billion, you didn't even present it to the parliament until June of 2018, which is barely 8 months to election. Shortly after the presentation of the budget for the election, the National Assembly went on 3 months recess, came back in October. Then, while they were on recess, the Committee on INEC and Electoral Reform in House of Reps were considering, but the approval did not come out in November. Now, November election was to take place in February of 2019. Look at the shortness of the time. If you recall, INEC chairman said, when after he postponed that election, he said, look, to procure a smart card reader, that small handheld device used for accreditation, takes the commission 6 months to procure. Because they are not
in order to
exactly.
So doesn't that play into the hands of the governing party, whichever it may be? If you release the funds shortly, that means things will not be done the way they are, and usually the winner happens to be the party in power.
Exactly. So that's why I said it's more political than administrative. It's not as if we do not have people with capacity in INEC. Over the years, I've had privilege of working with organizations that build the capacity of INEC staff.
So what would be, in your opinion, to do to fix this problem?
Well, political will to do the right thing. Now we're talking.
If you don't get that?
No, we have to. We have to, if you are serious about electoral, if we are serious about fixing our elections.
Is there anything civil society or the public can do to enforce this? Because a politician will always act like one, and will always act according to what is expedient for him or her.
At my personal level, I've made a lot of media advocacy. I've written a number of opinion articles to say we need to do this. But beyond that, civil society organizations, JIDE Africa, ECS, NDI, RRI, quite a number of them, Clean Foundation, PLAC, Nigerian Civil Society Situation Group, all of them have engaged both the National Assembly, the presidency, the INEC on what to do. And they were on standby to even help with funding support and all of that. But you see, where there is no political will, what you do is you filibuster. Let me give you instance. We were talking of electoral reform from EU under the European Union Election Observation Mission, EUEM, have always been to Nigeria since 1999, publishing official report on our elections, making bouquet of recommendations on what we need to do. But at the end of the day, 4 years down the line, less than 20% of those recommendations will be taken. Or will be.
Here's another one, JIDE. Legal requirements to be established for full results transparency with data easily accessible to the public. All results, including those from lower levels, should be immediately displayed at collation centers. We're not there yet.
Well, there is an attempt to do that. The issue of there is from E60E, from 60E, that talks about people's results. So at every polling unit, a presiding officer is supposed to paste results for people to see. But you see, people are clamoring for electronic voting, electronic transmission of results, and electronic. It's not the silver bullet. It's not the. I mean, civil society organizations have organized town hall meetings, and even last week, Young Africa organized one that was well attended. We have about 3 ministers in attendance. It was on channels, it was on Radio Nigeria for 3 hours, and that's at huge resources to the organization. But not so deaf as those who will not hear. Now, you talk about transparency in the election result transmission. All well and good. Where is the infrastructure if you go e-transmission? On what infrastructure would INEC pull that off? Electronic transmission of result. When there is network failure, since we license all these telecommunication agencies in 2001, 19 years after, you are still experiencing drop calls. You are still experiencing all manner of issues with even receiving calls in many parts. I'm not talking of urban centers. Maybe in Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Jos, and all of that. You may not have that kind of issues. But go to the hinterland. Go to some places. They are not even covered by any of the networks. So how do you intend to transmit? Even if the legal framework gives you the power to do electronic transmission of results or electronic voting. So we lack the infrastructure. And you cannot ask INEC, even if you enable INEC today to go and do this, will you also, during the town hall meetings that was held last week, was it the INEC chairman or one of the national committees that was saying, when they went to National Communication Commission to see how they can help them with infrastructure to do electronic, they were being asked for huge resources to enable. So where will INEC have that when it has to concentrate on administration of elections? Right. So lack of infrastructure is also a problem.
Let's move on to this other matter. I've heard in many quarters that political actors are among the biggest problems that we have in our democratic processes, and political parties are most guilty of most of our democratic infractions. We have 2 recommendations here. Maybe you could speak to those so that the campaign finance rules are comprehensive, to establish legal limits for campaign donations and expenditures of political parties, and introduce a legal obligation for individual candidates to report on contribution and spending. And there's also a recommendation to strengthen transparency and accountability in campaign spending. And we've seen in many countries around the world how even campaign donations of as little as $1,000 has led candidates to fold up and their election campaigns. Yet in Nigeria, we're seeing billions and billions come in there, including what you mentioned earlier about monies that were supposed to be spent on security being diverted for political purposes. So we have not gone very far in this area. What do we need to do here?
First is enforcement of the extant laws. I'm familiar with the campaign finance laws of Nigeria. I've done a lot of trainings on it. I've written research opinion. I've written research articles and even academic papers on them. I can tell you of many of the provisions of campaign finance in Nigeria, but the issue is enforcement. How do you enforce? You need, INEC has power to prosecute, but still INEC do not have power to make arrest or to investigate. Those powers are with the security agencies, police in particular. Now, let me paint a scenario to you. Let's take it from the very basics. Vote buying, vote trading. So you apprehend this person, you arrest him, he goes on bail, you document him, this is the amount we caught with him, he couldn't explain what he was doing, close to the polling unit and all of that. But everybody goes back to their base after the election. The person who effected the arrest possibly is not a policeman stationed in that state. He came on election security work. So he's gone back maybe to Lagos, to Osun or wherever. Now this arrest was made in Plateau. Who pays him to come and testify? And situations where those who infringe on the law happens to be the members of the ruling party in the state or at the federal level. What does the Attorney General do? Silently files a nolle prosecute to say the state is no longer interested in this. They do it quietly. They get them off the hook. And that's the impunity. Impunity.
Should be able to arrest?
No. We are talking of having Electoral Offences Commission akin to what we have with EFCC. EFCC can arrest, investigate, and prosecute. Those three powers must be in one agency. Now, INEC has said, look, we are overwhelmed. We don't even want to have to do with arrest, investigation, prosecution. Take that power to even prosecute away from us. INEC has a staff strength of 16,500. I tell you for free. But how many of them are lawyers? And they are not all concentrated in one place. You may get to a state office and find only 2 lawyers. Then politicians are even overwhelming INEC with issues that does not concern them, issues around nomination of candidates. So they have issues within the party about who is the right candidate and who is the wrong candidate.
So you are basically proposing that INEC, or that we have a body,
Electoral Offences Commission,
an Electoral Offences Commission that handles all of these elections, including pre-election matter.
Pre-election matter, whether there are any issues arising from election infraction, whether it's campaign finance violation, because in truth, INEC hasn't done well in terms of enforcement. I tell you, for instance, I've pointed this out a number of times. INEC ordinarily should set campaign finance limit for political parties. There is a provision, section 94 there, that says INEC in consultation with political parties will determine how much each of the political parties are to spend on their elections. More often than I think section 92, it doesn't get done. Why? I don't know. But there is a campaign finance limit for candidates. Now, INEC has power to monitor this campaign finance. Now they started doing that in 2015. 2019 is the second time INEC is doing it, as well as in some more of the state elections. So it's a learning curve for the commission. Now, we need to strengthen those laws because, and let me point this out very quickly to you as well. Look, you say a presidential candidate should spend 1 billion on his campaign. How realistic is that, Stanley? Now, let's even leave the issue of whether it's realistic or not. You now say a governor should spend 200 million. Now, is this scientific? If a governor is supposed to spend 200 million, and we have 36 states, and a governor governs one of the 36 states and FCT, why should a president spend 1 billion? Or, now, let me take it further.
The money is unrealistic.
Was unrealistic, it needs to be arbitrary, it's not logical, there is no basis, scientific basis.
Kept up with our inflation rate.
Exactly.
Right.
That's part of the problem.
Thank you so much.
That's part of the problem.
There's so much I would love to talk about. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come to talk to us and pointing out some of these things, and hopefully our electoral processes will be better
Also,
in the course of the next 21 years.
but we do hope that electoral reform for 2023 should be tidied up early enough so that the implementation can be seamless, because the money you need to finance 2023 election must start coming in by 2021-22 budget. Otherwise, it will be overwhelming.
So
when the time
decisions
comes.
have to be taken.
Exactly, early enough.
All right. We'll be right back. And that's it for this edition of Exclusive Interview. Join us again next time. Until then, thanks for stopping by.